Hi, I'm Dr. David Dobson. Welcome to Conversations. Today, my guest is Dr. Debora Linehan. Debora is an assistant professor at Royal Roads University's School of Business. Her research focuses on cultural integration in the workplace and explores biculturalism and ethnic identity. She has several years of experience in leadership roles within the financial industry. She received her Doctor of Social Sciences degree from Royal Roads University. In our conversation today, we will discuss Debora's research. How do Chinese Canadians employees perceive their career progression into senior leadership roles? It's a
Thanks for
great
having
pleasure
me
to have you
today.
with me today, Debora.
Thank you. And thank you for hosting these sessions. That's very nice.
Your research uses phenomenography research methodology. Can you please explain what phenomenography is?
Yeah, so phenomenography, not to be confused with phenomenology, which is the common misconception,
Okay.
is a qualitative methodology. And really it looks at it explores this variation in a phenomenon. It reveals the different ways that people experience the same phenomenon. So the interesting thing about phenomenography is that from it, you get a collective analysis of those experiences. It's a more fuller understanding, I think. And it borrows from elements of phenomenology in that it looks at human experience, but it also borrows from grounded theory in that it's inductive and bringing forward sort of new ideas. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing about phenomenography is that the themes that come out are hierarchically related to each other. Yeah. So you get this kind of pragmatic overall review of the research findings and an overarching story. Mm-hmm. So for example, in my study, you're talking about career progression for Chinese Canadians and how they experience that. There was an overall pattern related to their bicultural worldview. Yeah. The more that the participants changed their own values and behaviors, in other words, assimilated, the faster they progressed in their careers. Yeah. So I think it's helpful to have kind of an understanding of that. And it begs a question around, well, then what do we mean by diversity, equity, inclusion, and diversity of thought? If really, we're looking for assimilation. Yeah. So it's a very interesting methodology. It originally came out of the educational field, looking at academic development, widely used in the US, UK, Scandinavian countries, Hong Kong, Australia a lot, China, and increasingly in Canada. So it's been used in management studies, health sciences, media, acculturation, service industry, ethnic diversity, democracy. Yeah, so it's been used now quite widely in a lot of disciplines. So that's our phenomenography.
Using this approach, you studied the career progression of Chinese Canadians in leadership roles at a Canadian bank. Why were you interested in studying Chinese Canadians for your project?
Well, that is interesting, right? In my former role, I was on the Executive Diversity Council for the organization. So it allowed me a chance to kind of see the broader range of data that was available. And of course, organizations were seeking to have more representation of visible minorities. Once you got below that kind of the averages data, there's definitely a distinct gap for East Asians or Chinese Canadians. And yet it's curious because, they are a very important part of Canada. They represent a big part of the population in Vancouver and Toronto, where I did my research. Second largest population in Toronto and largest population in Vancouver. And, highly educated and qualified people. So it's curious. And there was a lot of quantitative data around the representation levels, usually in the for-profit sector in around 2%,
Mhm.
despite, this high population representation.
Mhm.
And Catalyst Canada, for example, did a study of like almost 5,000 employees
Mhm.
and found that, and 32% of them were Chinese Canadian, and found that they were not as satisfied with their careers and feel pressured to Canadianize was
Okay.
the word. And even now,
Mhm.
there was a study done in 2021 in GTR in Greater Toronto region
Mhm.
that the representation is still just 2%, 2.17%. So it's been sticky. It doesn't move, that representation. And I think it just surfaces the idea that there's imperfect execution of our diversity initiatives in Canadian organizations. So I would ask my colleagues
Mm.
when I was in the bank, like, well, why don't we have any Chinese Canadian executives?
Mm.
And they would say, I don't know. It just seemed to escape everybody's attention.
Mm.
It's like the model minority myth.
Mm.
They're quite visible, but
Mm.
also invisible. So
Mm.
that's kind of got how I got interested in the topic and
Mm.
allowed me to I wanted to know about their experiences.
Okay. Your study took place over an 8 years period. The first study was conducted in 2015, followed by another one in 2023. Why were you interested in doing a follow-up study?
Yeah, interesting. Well, when I first got started, I was a founding member of a group called the Vancouver chapter of a group called Ascend Canada.
Uh-huh.
Ascend Canada is an organization both in the States and Canada, and is funded by multinational corporations looking at Pan-Asian leadership development. So it was very apropos to my original study.
Mhm.
And in that, I developed a lot of long-term relationships with Chinese Canadians. And over the years, I heard some of their experiences, and particularly during COVID, around Asian hate, which was very sad. Vancouver had the highest rate of hate crimes at that time. And so, I was always curious about how they were doing. And it came along this year during Asian History Month, and I just reflected on, oh, it's been 8 years.
Mm.
I thought, well, that's an auspicious sign,
Yeah.
8 being the lucky
Lucky
number. I just think I have to do a follow-up study. I have to look at how things have changed. And, it really, I think, was a unique opportunity to look at those original findings
Yeah.
and also to see how things have changed. And
Yeah.
I have to tell you, David, it was a wonderful experience. Having the, just the luxury of time and reflection to look back, do a look back.
Yeah.
It's very introspective to see how really life shapes careers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'll do a third study in 5 years.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
I'll do it again, but it was really wonderful. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
So, what did you learn from these studies?
Well, interestingly, the follow-up study did validate the original findings. So there was a lot of common
Mm-hmm.
themes, which I think is good because it
Mm-hmm.
showed the rigor of the first study.
Mm.
But also, I think the value of the second study is that a
Mhm.
couple of new things came out,
Mm-hmm.
and we were able to get a much more nuanced view of the original findings. So we
Okay.
were able to go deeper,
Mm-hmm.
when people had that the reflection time. And I want to acknowledge here that I worked with my colleague Nicole Bourget, who's works at the University of Fraser Valley as well. And so she and I collaborated on this study. And what we learned is that these participants really love leadership. They love leading a bicultural team. They're innately qualified to do so, I think, with their worldviews.
Mm-hmm.
They were advancing in their careers, which was happy news, but they were also plateauing in their careers. So it was kind of coming to that hitting the ceiling of that senior leadership representation. Interestingly, their Confucian values remained very strong. And I think even deepened during COVID, Confucian values around, deference to leader, hard work's going to win the day. Very importantly, affirmation of family values that really came out even stronger during COVID. And the communication style was a big theme that carried on. That we see that the model minority myth and what we say about a communication style is definitely true. That those that enjoyed that progression in their careers, they really did it through social engagement, soft skills, and assimilation to those North American kind of communication styles. That talking really is a cultural practice. So I think it showed that. The findings also showed us where there were stalls. So where participants that advanced could really leverage networks and social capital. Those that didn't expand their networks really stalled, or if they had a changeover in leaders, or the way sponsorship was enacted was very inconsistent. The role of the direct manager and mentorship is very key. So, that just highlights the qualities, the competencies of leaders to develop diversity and help people expand their careers is so important. And I think throughout, though, they all gave incredible credit to the organization for their commitment to diversity. But something's still missing. So even though the commitment is there, I think organizations have a hard time going deeper, getting beyond kind of the demographics, or they've got too many initiatives on the go. And how can we leverage our understanding of those individual identities deeper? So a lot of the same, but more nuanced.
Based on your research, what are your recommendations to organizations?
Well, I mean, keep up the good work, but I would also say that we need to figure out a way to democratize mentorship and sponsorship. What I mean by that is that on paper, all of our practices around career development, having those career conversations, mentorship is all perfect, but in practice, it's not. It's not so perfect, right?
That's true.
And it's like, who gets picked to be mentored and who doesn't get picked? And so somehow we need to find more structural ways to advance that. And I think also organizations need to understand that there are the structural ways, but there's also the informal networks. And we're not really paying attention to how social capital in those informal networks are enacted. And I think, the use of data analytics are, going to bring more prominence and help us to understand how diversity is advancing in organizations. And finally, I would say we need to look at this idea about assimilation. What do we really want when we say diversity, equity, inclusion? What does that really mean? And most importantly, I think it's the tremendous advantage of developing leaders and leaders' cultural competence is, I think, one of the most important ways to advance our objectives here. That leaders, cultural competence, having an ability to understand other people's worldviews, and developing ways to create that inclusivity in their teams, right? So they have to develop their own competencies before they can, and understand their own worldviews before they can see the talent, the trapped talent that's in their teams. So really always about leadership, right?
Yeah. No, you really good
but a
point.
different kind of leadership.
Because you raised one of the point was, many of these leaders come to their plateau, and Now, what should organization do to keep that same excitement which they started in the initial stage? Now they are kind of bored, you know.
Well, we did see that in some of the participants, some left if they
Yeah,
were not satisfied with their career progression.
yeah,
They moved to other
okay,
organizations. They left.
yeah,
Some went to more self-development around lateral networks.
yeah,
So it's true that, you know, as you come to a fine point,
yeah,
there's only so many positions
yeah,
available.
yeah,
But it still remains the case that at the very senior leadership roles, and the participants said that I don't see myself there. I
yeah,
don't see myself in the executive. So
yeah,
there still is in that final step
yeah,
of getting to those senior leadership roles and how
yeah,
even though we're developing people, how we
yeah,
sponsor them
yeah,
forward, there's still a gap.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, definitely this definitely a very serious question, because I'm also thinking, um because these leaders have so much to offer, and if they're leaving it, you're leaving that amazing amount of knowledge and skill sets going with them. So it
Yeah,
might create a vacuum of that leadership roles.
yeah, it is incredible. I mean, they're
Yeah,
hardworking,
yeah,
they're incredibly well educated,
yeah,
and they bring a worldview that I think
yeah,
is helpful. You know, like it's interesting if you look at the concepts of biculturalism, just
uh-huh,
by virtue of the fact that an individual has gone through that process
yeah,
of integrating their identities,
yeah,
they develop more flexibility, more
mm,
empathy, they have better negotiation skills.
uh-huh,
They can lead multicultural teams. And if you look at Canada,
yeah,
we are a multicultural nation. So
yes,
we need leaders that can understand multicultural teams.
yeah,
As you say,
yeah,
it's lost
yeah,
talent.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Finally, what advice do you have for researchers who wish to take on a similar type of study?
Well, I would always say triangulate your data. So what we did in our study, both the first and the second time,
Hmm.
is we included other measurements. So
Okay,
we used an ethnic identity scale. We
okay,
used a bicultural or acculturation
okay.
scale designed for East Asians.
Hmm.
So you've
Okay.
got additional data, you know,
Hmm.
in addition to
Hmm. Hmm.
uh, the demographics
Hmm.
to add to your results. So triangulating your data, I think, is important.
Hmm.
The thing that I think was really valuable the second time around was having the ability to collaborate with a second researcher.
Yeah.
And Nicole and I, you know, would often just talk
Mm.
through some of the things that we were hearing from
Mhm.
participants, and it really helped us to
Okay.
go deeper into the findings. So
Okay.
having that, you know, because I had my own
Yeah.
ideas maybe from the
Yeah.
first study.
Yeah.
So really having a second view, I think added to the rigor of the study.
Yeah.
And then I think the third thing is that it's still very broad.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so now we want to go deeper, right?
Yeah.
So if you're looking at diversity, equity, inclusion, it really
Hmm.
you're talking about cultural change in organizations.
Hmm.
And that's such a massive topic. There's so
It
many
is.
variables,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
you know, in embedded in that. So
Yeah.
I think now, you know, we will look deeper.
Yeah.
We're going to look at that
Yeah.
organizational structure and
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
social capital is distributed. We're going to look at you know, a happy finding that I think organizations can play a very important role in society in ameliorating some of
Yeah.
the backtracking we're seeing on
Yeah.
diversity, equity, inclusion. You know, I'm a little concerned about that.
Yeah.
That that organizations can play an important role. So I think
Yeah.
we want to go deeper on that,
Hmm.
and just really looking at the idea of how biculturals are an important talent within organizations. So it's just going deeper. DEI is you're in the long game.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
And in general, I'm interested in, you know, the personal, the relational, the systemic transformations that are required to create justice and diversity, equity, inclusion. I think everybody is.
Yeah.
But I really think that intercultural leadership is what we need now. It's so important now more than ever to develop our cultural competencies as leaders, to understand other worldviews, to develop our own, understand our own inputs there. And if we're going to lead in our new world, we need new ways of doing things. Mm-hmm. So that's my advice: develop intercultural leadership.
Thank you for your time, Debora. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for having me.